Start recording. So hi Shan, welcome
Hi,
to
Ray.
welcome to the Founders Predicament podcast, and thank you very much for your time and joining me today. So I know that you're just winding down your startup, and I'm sure you have lots of emotions around that. But let's go back before the startup, which was called Just Ads, right? So before Just Ads, what were you doing before Just Ads? How did you get to that point, and what led you to Just Ads?
So I was one of these kids always that was really interested in computers and building stuff with it. But I decided to study business and management instead and started my career as an account manager at an ad tech startup. That's where I learned how to work with Google and Facebook marketing campaigns. But given that it was a tech startup, I was more interested in the tech side of it. So I moved to product management first. But that startup wasn't going anywhere and got acquired by a bigger company, and I left it to start a marketing consulting business because I realized that if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, if I wanted to actually build software, I could start by just doing marketing consulting work, get some revenue going, and then just start hiring engineers to build prototypes. So that's what I did. I started doing marketing consulting, and I would just think of ideas and try to build prototypes with as little expenditure as possible.
Okay. Um, so um, so you built software using what was this when you were, because you're from Pakistan, right?
Yeah.
Where in Pakistan are you from?
So I'm from Karachi.
Karachi. So is that the biggest or the second biggest city in Pakistan?
That's the biggest city, yeah.
And how many people are there?
Well, nobody knows for sure, but it's more than 20 million people.
So it's big, like Mexico City
Yes,
size big.
for sure. Yeah, it's pretty big and chaotic.
So you were building software in Karachi.
No, so I chose to recruit engineers in Lahore instead,
Oh, I
which
see.
must be the second biggest city in the country.
Right.
Uh, uh, Partly because that's where uh, more of the startup scene was in Pakistan at the time, but also because I just wanted to explore other parts of the country.
Oh, I see. So you used recruiting people from a different city as a way of exploring that city.
Yeah, actually, because I studied across different countries in Europe, and I saw that within Europe, this inter Europe collaboration was promoted and facilitated quite a lot, and I felt that we don't do that as much in South Asia, even within countries. If you're from Karachi, just stick in Karachi. My family, for example, recommended that I just recruit engineers in Karachi instead, and I was like, I don't know, maybe within a country, it's good to have some cultural exchange as well that I experienced during my undergrad years.
Right. So, um, what led you to Just Ads? What was the problem? What were you solving?
So I had worked at this ad tech startup called Campania as an account manager. And even though it was a tech company working on something very fancy, high frequency bidding, using machine learning, what I realized was that it didn't work if us account managers did not do the work on structuring and managing campaigns in the right way. And that was a bit of an eye opener for me because from the outside you think marketing is so advanced and so fancy with all this AI and machine learning being applied, but what I saw and experienced was that it's all run on spreadsheets. It's all manual and very arbitrary. You have performance marketers creating campaign structures for different channels, and then you have spreadsheets where you store those structures. So if you have to do an A/B test, or if you want to optimize your budgets across different campaigns, these processes are largely manual and very time consuming. So that's what I saw that you can't apply any intelligent machine learning based automation if you're not managing the campaigns in the right kind of way, which was a completely manual, time consuming process.
So you were trying to save manual labor on the running of the campaigns. Yes.
Save time, but also to avoid costly errors and inefficiencies, because of course when you're doing all that manually,
Yeah.
there is a greater chance of error, and it leads to inefficiencies. You're overspending in one place and underspending in other places, and it's hard to keep track of it all.
So if you're doing A/B testing, for example, right? If you're doing A/B testing, then you know that one's going to perform better than, ultimately one will perform better than the other, and then you pick the one that does better. So that's like learning through failure. So was that the kind of thing you were trying to get rid of, or were you trying to get rid of something else?
Well, we were not trying to get rid of A/B testing, of course. We were trying to make the process for that a lot more seamless and automated. So let me just give you a quick example, right? In a Google Ads account, you would have hundreds of campaigns with sometimes thousands of ad groups. Within each ad group, you would have multiple ads. If you wanted to test a different type of ad copy, you would need to then have all those ad groups in a spreadsheet, and then make some modifications, apply labels, and then upload it, and then create a spreadsheet with a pivot table, so that 7 days later you download the data and then you can see how different ads are performing. And then if you have enough data to make a decision on what's working better, you enable that version and pause the other version. But in some cases you wouldn't have enough data. There's a lot of complexity there that was handled manually. That just didn't make sense. It just seemed wholly inefficient, especially knowing that we are moving towards a world where there would be more and more use of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Right. So where would it, if things have gone well, where would you be now? If things had, if the startup had succeeded, then where would you be now?
Do you mean as a founder, or do you mean as a startup, or do you mean what the marketing landscape would look like if we succeeded at transforming it? If you
succeeded, how would you have changed the industry?
Yeah, great question, right? So if we had succeeded, marketers would no longer have to spend dozens of hours on spreadsheets. Their job would be very clear. There would be one interface where you provide your creative assets, or descriptions for your creative assets if the creative assets are being generated by AI. So there's one place where you input the creative, you decide what target audiences are relevant for you, you allocate your budgets, and you select your KPI goals. You would just have one platform, one dashboard where you put all of it, and the rest of the process, creating campaigns in ad groups and interfacing with each of the ad networks and their APIs, all of that would be in the back end automated.
Right. So what went wrong?
Great question again, right? So a lot of things, of course, went wrong. This was
actually
my
let me stop you there. Sorry. What went right, and then what went wrong? So obviously, like when you started, you must have been full of hope, and everybody, including the investors, were presumably, banking on a good outcome. So what went right, and then what went wrong? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So no worries at all. So what went right was that we secured customers who were really interested in building this before we started off. So before we started building, we already had a couple of customers that were quite eager and interested in what we were building. In fact, a couple of the people working at one of these companies were our first angel investors. So we actually, before we started building, we convinced our customers to join us on this ride. That was an early win. Then setting up an engineering team that could build product, at a significantly lower cost, especially in the early stages when there's chance for a need to change product direction early on, or start from scratch. Sometimes you build a product and then you're like, maybe you think maybe you're not heading in the right direction. You can start over. We set up a good, I would say, operating structure which was quite cost effective. We also managed to build an early version of the prototype that worked. Of course, the scope of the product was quite big, but we still managed to build the first version where you can actually do what I was describing, where you could provide your creative assets, you could provide your target audiences, and provide your budgets and actually launch and run campaigns through this first version of the product. So those things went well. I think the primary thing that didn't go well, and that I would consider a mistake, is that rather than continuing to bootstrap, our focus shifted to trying to raise money. And our thinking at the time was that given the scope of this challenge and the complexity of the marketing industry, we thought we needed to raise capital. So we sort of operating under that assumption. And that, I think, was one of the mistakes we made.
Sorry, let me ask you a little bit about that. So your burn rate was whatever. Would it have been possible, so with a different mindset, would it have been possible to have gotten past the hump and gotten to a sustainable business if you hadn't been looking for capital?
Yeah, I think there was a greater chance if we just focused on growing with customer revenue. That would have given us a bigger chance of succeeding.
So did you succeed in raising the capital that you looked for, or you didn't succeed in raising the capital that you looked for?
We didn't succeed in it. We had a very small angel round in the beginning, but we couldn't raise any funding after that.
So do you think the idea still has legs?
I think the idea still has legs for sure, because we structured and modeled the idea in such a way that it would have legs regardless of changes in the industry, because we knew that Google's and Facebook's APIs can change, how you manage campaigns through their platforms can change, but there's some first principles that wouldn't change. Marketers want control over what their ads look like, who they're shown to, how much money is spent on them, and how much return they expect. So that concept still has legs.
Very interesting. So if you could do it again, so I mean, I think you've answered this question to a certain extent, but what would you do different? So rather than, so it sounds like you spent money and energy chasing after money. Where would you spend that money and energy if you could do it again? Like I know you've said, but could you be a bit more specific about how you would get to a sustainable business?
I would focus a lot more on marketing and sales. I would forget about funding. I would just go for customers, like, period. I would just assume that we're going to grow when our customers pay us money. And especially given that our operating costs were so low, that could have worked out. And that also, ironically enough, I feel that if we had more customer traction, that may have increased our chances of fundraising too. So I think that was the blunder, to think that we have a working prototype, and it's such a great idea, and it's just so clear, and we have we felt that we had sorted out more than was needed to raise funding, so we kind of postponed the marketing and sales push uh, till like after we had raised some money, because we wanted to polish the product a bit more before we really went out to focusing a lot on sales. Partly because it wasn't without reason. There was a reason. The reason was that we felt that given that it's such a competitive industry, and it's really hard to convince customers to give you a second chance. We wanted it to be a bit more perfect before we really started focusing on marketing and sales.
So a classic case of letting the perfect stand in the way of the good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's I mean, I'm smiling, I'm laughing, but I do feel your pain. I get that. There's people that I work with who want everything perfect, and I have to sometimes just shut them down and say, no, it's good enough, let's go.
Yeah.
And that can sink a lot of that can sink a lot of products, is seeking perfection without putting it in front of the audience. Because you just run out of time or money or whatever. How did you apply to investors? Let's just look at that portion of it, if you don't mind. So how did you go after money? And let's just assume that going after the money was the right thing. What would you do differently if you could start again? If you could go back, I don't know, 12, 15 months, say beginning of 2022, how would you go about finding them, given your experience? So describe your experience and then tell me what you do differently.
So as I said in the first stage at pre-seed, we went for basically invited our customers to be angel investors. So that gave us like an early capital injection. Then after that, we applied to a couple of accelerators. That was sort of like interim, I guess, funding strategy. And then once we felt more confident in our first version of the product, I looked up the most recent deals in ad tech. I looked up venture capitalists who invest at the seed stage in ad tech and martech companies, and I just started reaching out to them through cold emails. If I were to do it again, I would reach out to a lot more potential investors. I don't think I went into the hundreds, and I could have been more rigorous there. Just reach out to a lot more people. Secondly, I would reach out to them over phone or in person rather than email. Just go to events where they may be there and just walk up to them and have a really good elevator pitch, or try to find their phone numbers and just call. I relied too much on cold emails. So yeah, calls and in-person pitching rather than cold emails, and just a lot more number.
So did you get onto any accelerator programs? Did you enroll in any of those?
No.
So would you have applied to more of those? Do you think that's it sounds like you had your product and everything. Do you think an accelerator program would have helped you?
I think it would have. I think it would have.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So, so what was your big plan? Like, were you going to sell this in like say 2027 or something? Was there an exit strategy?
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to sell it ultimately to a bigger ad tech or martech company, maybe even one of the bigger ad platforms like Google and Facebook, because I could see that with advances in AI and machine learning, they would have to completely revamp their user experience. They would have to completely revisit how the process for managing campaigns works. And I was and still am quite confident that from a user experience design perspective, we were quite spot on. So yeah, that was the plan: get customers to love us and start using us quite a lot, and then at some point try to attract the attention of these potential acquirers.
Is there any hope for this platform? Just Ads? Is it dead? I mean, what constitutes a dead product? What constitutes a living product?
I mean, we'd have to. It's not functional anymore. Like, we have the code base somewhere, but it's not live. And it's been more than a year since since we turned it off. So there's been changes in the APIs. We'd probably have to like rewrite a lot of the code. But at the same time, the design, not just user interface design, but the design of the system that we created, that is still an asset that we have. And we could build another product from scratch based on the same first principles, and applying, of course, all the lessons that we learned from our mistakes.
So Shan, what are you doing now, and what's next for you?
That's a great question. So I just got my work authorization a couple of months ago. So I'm officially allowed to work in the US. Yeah, exactly. I'm allowed to work and start a company and all that. I'm in the process of deciding what startup to build next. I'm not considering bringing Just Ads back at the moment, at least, for various reasons that we can discuss if you want. But right now there's two startups that I'm considering. One is in health tech. My wife is a doctor, and we've been talking about preventive healthcare for a very long time. So we're considering creating a service that's both physical and digital. There's a physical space where you can get all sorts of holistic health testing done in the same place, with a lot of emphasis on physical user experience, because to get your blood drawn is something very few people really enjoy doing. And given how important this sort of testing is for your longer term health, it's a bit strange that that experience isn't made more enticing, right? Have some nice classical music playing in the background, have a lot of natural sunlight, have plants and flowers, serve a small plant-based meal at the end of the experience, really turn healthcare measurement into an experience. Because once you have that data, then you can design a digital personal dashboard for your health. So there's a place where you get all this testing done, and it's a lovely experience. And then there's an app where you see your personal dashboard, you see exactly where your health is right now, and you see your future. So you can forecast your health. You can say, what would this dashboard look like when I'm 60? And it visualizes that for you. It shows you what your body composition would look like if you're not exercising, or if you're exercising just once a week as opposed to 5 days a week. So so a platform that does that.
So that's one idea. What was the other idea?
The other idea is to make it possible for anyone to train their own personalized intelligence. So basically, that's also every person has a different set of objectives and goals in life, right? They're doing a different thing. And in order to achieve those objectives and goals, there's different sets of knowledge that are relevant to it. There's different data streams that are relevant to it, different types of data. So this startup would build an application that allows you to train your personal intelligence in as seamless a way as you train a brilliant fresh graduate from a Ivy League university.
Okay. I didn't quite understand how that works. So could
Yeah, so
you
let me give
explain?
you an example, right? Imagine there would be a just a mobile and web version of this application too. But it's easier to understand if I explain the augmented reality version of it, right? So say there's an augmented reality app that gives you a virtual study, these old study rooms where you would have like a small library in your desk and where you really work, right? Uh, like your personal mission control. You define your goals and objectives there. You can select what books are relevant to the work that you're doing. You can, let's say, connect your Kindle account, and you can select what books you want to include in your study, and you actually see them in your virtual bookshelf. You can plug in your news subscriptions. So if you're subscribed to Harvard Business Review, McKinsey Quarterly, Financial Times, you plug in your news subscriptions. Say if you're a marketer, you have your APIs that bring in quantitative data. You plug that in. And on top of this, the process of fine tuning that's required to personalize language models for your own purpose, this application would gamify the experience of that fine tuning. Because currently it's a very technical process. You create a data set, and it's just basically largely for machine learning researchers and engineers to do it. An average person cannot do fine tuning right now. So we want to gamify that rather than it being about you giving a data set to fine tune language models with. We would create mini games that you play. Then that would involve questions, and maybe maybe even you're shown some videos, and the language model asks you what you think about it and asks you clarifying questions. So that's what I meant when I said it's a bit like if you hire a really brilliant genius level IQ graduate from like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, MIT, they have like great baseline knowledge and intelligence, but then you have to tell them what their role is, what they're going to do. You have to tell them, hey, here's all the information about our company that you need to know. Here's all the information about the projects that are going to be relevant to you. Here's the sources of professional knowledge. These books you need to study, or these journals that you scour over. And here's the types of tasks that you would do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And then there's some process of feedback, right? You're like, all right, now go and do this worksheet on analyzing marketing campaigns to find what campaigns should be paused, right? So the graduate then does that and brings it back to you, and you give that person some feedback, right? So this whole process of training a intelligent person to fill a role in your team, we want to create an application that models the process of training language models using the same logic, and gamifying it to make it as simple as actually working with another human being, where you talk and you give them this file, and you make that you translate that technical process into a non-technical user experience.
Okay, well, I wish you luck with that. No thoughts about getting a job?
I mean, I understand that either of these, especially the healthcare startup, if I decide to go with that, that's going to take a long time to to actually get going. So right now I am looking for jobs. I'd love to work for the next year, perhaps even 2 years.
Yeah.
I've only ever had like one job in my life. And then I've worked on startups for 5 years. So I would actually really like to work at a at a startup or a bigger company for a couple of years, just to diversify my experience and to learn more from a different setting. And then, eventually do another startup.
It's always good to have additional perspectives.
Exactly.
Which something like that would give you.
Exactly.
So Shan, thank you so much for being on the Founders Predicament podcast. And I wish you all the best with your future endeavors. And thank you also for sharing the the story of Just Ads. And I'm sure it was very sad when the day that you unplugged it.
Yeah, it's it was certainly difficult for sure. But thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you. It was a pleasure.
Most welcome. Okay, take care. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.